They said the nuns had been reassigned. No farewell, no forwarding address, no trace. 20 months later, one of them was found locked underground, starved, broken, and still clutching her rosary. Now, the woman who once fled the church must return to uncover the truth behind the lies, and the bodies buried beneath holy ground. Because when silence is sacred, justice becomes heresy. If you believe faith should never bury the truth, like and subscribe. The envelope was thick, the kind used for birth certificates or court documents. Things too heavy to speak for themselves. It arrived on Elena Rivas's desk in the middle of a slow Friday afternoon, hand-delivered to her law office in Los Angeles by a courier who offered no return address, just a clipboard and a nod. Elena turned it over once, twice. The paper was coarse, the flap sealed with a single strip of tape. No markings, no sender. She should have ignored it, but she didn't. She slid it open with the blade she kept tucked beneath the legal pad and spilled its contents onto her desk. A folded letter, a flash drive, and a grainy photocopy of a news clipping. Her eyes went to the headline first. 3 nuns reassigned, then vanish. No investigation ordered. Santa Reina Diocese, Baja California. Dated April 12, 2023. Elena's hand paused midair. A pulse started in her neck. She hadn't heard the word Santa Reina in over a decade. Hadn't wanted to. The accompanying photo was small and blurred, but she recognized 2 of the faces. Sister Magdalena, stern, wise, the one who used to lead evening prayers with her eyes shut tight, like she could see heaven behind them. And Sister Corinne, the youngest. The one who used to sneak Elena extra jam packets when no one was looking. The 3rd nun in the photo was unfamiliar, her face partly obscured by shadow. Her name, Sister Agnes, was underlined in ink. The letter was typed, unsigned. You left for good reason, but those who stayed paid the price. These 3 nuns discovered financial irregularities inside the diocese. Embezzlement on a massive scale. Millions funneled out of relief programs into offshore accounts. They compiled evidence. When they brought it to Bishop Alvarado, they were told to pack for reassignment. They never reached their destinations. No travel logs, no updates, no bodies. The church says they were relocated. No one in the new parishes ever saw them. This is the 2nd time silence has protected power. I thought maybe this time you wouldn't let it. Elena set the letter down carefully. Her hand hovered over the flash drive, heart hammering louder than the city traffic outside her office window. The soft hum of the air conditioner had never sounded more oppressive. She pushed her laptop open and inserted the drive. A single folder appeared. Santa Reina funds inside, spreadsheets, scanned ledgers, and something labeled Video March 10th, Corinne Final. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. Sunset smeared the skyline in blood and fire. She hadn't worn a habit in 11 years, hadn't bowed her head in prayer in just as long. But suddenly, she found her fingers twitching toward the outline of the cross that no longer hung around her neck. It had taken Elena years to claw her way out of the church. Not faith. That was different. Faith was quiet, personal, the thing she'd whispered to herself on cold tile floors at night. What she left behind was the system, the silence, the denials, the reassignment of predators and protectors alike. She had told herself she was done. She had traded her habit for a law degree, her vows for statutes and motions. She fought for abused women now, mostly immigration and custody cases. Clean work, urgent work. Not holy work, not anymore. But this wasn't clean, and it wasn't distant. It was Santa Reina, and it was them. That night, Elena sat alone in her apartment, the windows shut tight, the lights low. The video file played on her screen like a dying confession. It was filmed in a modest room. Stone walls, dim light. Sister Corinne sat close to the camera, her face pale and tight with fear. If you're watching this, it means something's happened to us. Maybe nothing, but we don't trust the reassignment. The bishop looked us in the eye and said the church would handle it. Internally, we found the accounts, at least 3. One's in Panama, under a shell corporation called Castillo Consulting. That's not even subtle. The aid shipment stopped arriving weeks ago. We asked why. We were told we miscounted. She paused, eyes flicking to the side. Someone off-screen whispered something. We've hidden a backup of everything. In the convent garden, under the altar stone, the 3rd tree. Please, please don't let this get buried with us. The video ended. Elena stared at the screen for a long time after. Then she closed the laptop. At 1:30 a.m., she packed a single bag. By 3 a.m., she had booked a flight to Baja California. By sunrise, Elena Rivas was on her way back to the diocese she had vowed never to see again. Not as a nun. This time, she was bringing the law. The bus rolled into Santa Reina just after noon, heat shimmer curling off the pavement like a mirage. Elena stepped off with dust on her jeans and a tight knot in her stomach. It looked the same. The faded murals of saints peeling off adobe walls. The uneven cobblestone streets winding toward the central plaza. The smell of incense and car exhaust and boiled corn. If it weren't for the absence of Sister Magdalena's voice rising in evening hymns, Elena might have thought time had stood still. But it hadn't. Something was off. She felt it in the silence. In the way no one made eye contact as she passed the old mission school. In the way the statue of Our Lady of Sorrows had been moved, tucked now behind the chapel, as if even she were ashamed. The last time Elena had stood on these streets, she'd been 24, barefoot and bleeding. Her hand still bore a faint scar from punching the rectory door before walking away. Forever, she thought. Now she stood in front of it again, older, sharper, wearing no veil but still carrying the weight of 1,000 silent prayers. The parish bulletin board outside the chapel entrance was outdated by 6 months. The photos of the 3 missing sisters, Corinne, Magdalena, Agnes, had been removed. In their place, a flyer for a charity golf tournament and a quote from Bishop Alvarado printed in cursive font. Where God calls, we follow, no questions asked. Elena pushed the chapel door open. The smell hit her first. Wood polish, wax, and humidity. She slipped into the last pew and waited for the sensation of suffocation to pass. The sanctuary was empty. A statue of Christ loomed above the altar, arms outstretched in a posture that once offered her comfort. Now it felt more like surveillance. She bowed her head, not in prayer, but in reflex. "Señorita?" A voice broke the stillness. She looked up. A small woman stood in the side aisle, her face familiar. Dark eyes, wiry frame, the convent's housekeeper. "Elena?" the woman said again, cautiously now. "Is that you?" Elena rose slowly. "Sophia." Sophia came forward, her expression shifting from disbelief to fear. "Why are you here?" she whispered, glancing toward the back entrance. "Does the bishop know you're coming?" "I didn't come to speak with him," Elena said. "I came because of them." She didn't need to say the names. Sophia flinched, then crossed herself quickly. "You shouldn't be here. I need to know what happened." Sophia hesitated, wringing her apron. Then, in a voice barely audible, "They were scared. The week before, they were moved. Sister Magdalena told me not to trust anyone, not even the ones in collars." Elena felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "Did they say what they found?" "They said the aid was gone. The clinics had no supplies. The shelter closed, but the bishop said funding was increased." "And then?" "Then one day, they were just gone. No goodbye. Their rooms were emptied. I asked where they'd gone." Her voice dropped even lower. "Father Manuel said they'd been transferred, but their bags were still in the laundry. Sister Corinne's shoes were still by the garden gate. Elena's hands clenched. Where is Father Manuel now? He runs the bookkeeping now. Took over everything after Magdalena left. Elena nodded. I need to speak to him. You can try. He's in the rectory. Will you help me? Sophia hesitated. Then she stepped back and shook her head. You don't understand. People disappear here, Elena. Good people. If you start asking questions, he'll know. They always know. Elena looked her in the eye. That's why I'm here. The rectory office had been renovated. The wooden furniture was new, and the AC unit rattled in a mechanical buzz that broke the stillness. Father Manuel looked up from his computer with polite confusion. Elena Rivas, he said after a moment. I thought you left the church. I did. He gestured for her to sit. Then what brings you back? I'm a lawyer now, she said, settling across from him. I work with nonprofits, mostly humanitarian law. He smiled politely. Noble work. I heard about the sisters, she said. His expression tightened. Ah, they disappeared. They were reassigned. To where? I'm not at liberty to say. Father Manuel, she said softly. Their shoes were left behind. No personal items, no goodbye. That's not reassignment. That's disappearance. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Is this a formal inquiry? No, she said. Not yet. He studied her. You always were the difficult one. You questioned too much. And you always answered too little. A moment of silence passed between them like a blade. Why are you really here? He asked. I think someone murdered 3 women of God, Elena said. And I think this diocese helped cover it up. Father Manuel's smile vanished. I suggest you tread very carefully, he said. You may have taken off your habit, but you're still bound by what you learned here. Silence, obedience, discretion. Elena stood. I never took a vow of silence, and God never asked me to obey liars. She walked out before he could respond. That night, Elena stayed in a cheap motel on the edge of town. She locked her door twice, propped a chair under the knob, and checked the flash drive again. Among the spreadsheets was one labeled, Grant Audit, Confidential. It showed line items from major donors and Vatican grants, money earmarked for food programs, medical clinics, and rural schools. Nearly $1.2 million had been dispersed over 3 years. Less than a third of it had been used. The rest was funneled through vague consulting expenses and land improvement fees. All of it signed off by Bishop Alvarado. One entry made her skin crawl. Castillo Consulting, S.A., $250,000. Sustainability Project, Wire Destination, Panama. Same shell company Sister Corinne had named. Same path of money. Same disappearing women. Elena stared at the ceiling that night, sleep refusing to come. She had returned to Santa Reina expecting silence, but what she found was worse. It was a chorus of people who knew something was wrong and had been taught to keep their mouths shut. 10 months earlier, the soup kitchen in Santa Reina's southern district had run out of rice. Again. Sister Magdalena stood by the open pantry, her jaw clenched. The steel shelves were nearly bare. The only things left were 3 cans of beans, a crate of powdered milk, and a broken scale that had never been replaced. She turned to Sister Corinne, who hovered behind her like a shadow. Did you check with the office? Magdalena asked. Corinne nodded. They said the delivery truck came through last week, that it must have gone to San Felipe instead. That's the 3rd time they've said that this month. They said we're miscounting. Magdalena exhaled slowly. Outside, in the yard, 27 children waited for food they wouldn't receive. She turned to the chalkboard, erased the full menu, and rewrote, Today, milk plus bread. Sorry, children, we're working on it. Her handwriting trembled. That night, the 3 sisters met in the convent library. The room was old, stone-walled, and usually empty. Sister Agnes lit a single candle and shut the heavy door behind her. "Close the windows, too," Magdalena said. "No shadows, no ears." They gathered at a table tucked in the far corner. Corinne laid out the notebook she'd been keeping, pages of handwritten observations, delivery inconsistencies, and dates. Agnes added a manila envelope with copies of grant announcements printed from the diocesan newsletter. "All this aid," Corinne whispered. "All this money. Where's it going?" Magdalena took the papers, her eyes scanning the pages. "We've been getting less than half of what's promised," Agnes said. "The clinic hasn't had antibiotics in weeks. And yet Bishop Alvarado just installed new marble flooring in the diocesan hall," Magdalena added bitterly. "I overheard Father Manuel saying the bishop has new property in La Paz," Corinne said. "Said it like it was a joke." Magdalena sat back. Her face, always lined with severity, now looked heavier, sadder. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Back in Honduras. Money meant for the poor, swallowed by priests with golden rings and silver tongues." "What do we do?" Corinne asked. "We gather evidence," Magdalena said. "Everything. Then we confront him." Agnes looked terrified. "He'll silence us." "Not if we go through the right channels." "There are no right channels," Corinne said. "That's what Elena used to say." At the mention of her name, a strange quiet fell over the room. Magdalena broke it first. "Elena had her reasons for leaving, but we are still here, and so is our duty." Over the next 3 weeks, the sisters worked in silence and in secret. Corinne used her role in the youth outreach program to quietly photocopy receipts and delivery logs. Agnes cataloged clinic supplies and matched them against reported donations. Magdalena met with a former accountant in San Felipe, an old friend who once worked with church finance. What they uncovered was worse than they'd feared. Dozens of wire transfers to non-existent vendors, duplicate entries, altered records, aid funds rerouted through shell entities with no physical presence. A full 60% of grant money was unaccounted for over the last 3 years. And it all had one signature: Bishop Alvarado. On the 4th week, Magdalena walked into the bishop's office with a folder in hand and fire in her spine. He didn't look up when she entered. He was reviewing blueprints. "For the new cathedral renovations?" she asked. He smiled, looking up. "Sister Magdalena, to what do I owe the visit?" She held the folder out. "Proof of theft, fraud, misuse of funds meant for the people of Santa Reina." His expression didn't change. He accepted the folder, opened it slowly, and glanced at the first page. "I see," he said. "I expect this to be taken to the archdiocese and to the donors. Is that a threat?" "Number, it's a plea for honesty." He closed the folder and set it down. "Sister, I've served this diocese longer than you've been alive. You have no idea how difficult it is to keep the lights on in a place like this. Bureaucracy, politics. You think the Vatican actually helps us?" "I think Jesus didn't wear designer shoes," he chuckled. "Careful, sister. Righteousness becomes arrogance when it forgets humility. I'm not asking for perfection, just for decency." He smiled wider. "Then you'll be pleased to know I've decided you and your companions will be reassigned. A new mission. San Gabriel, I believe. Fresh air. New needs." Her face hardened. "We haven't received transfer paperwork. You will soon." That night, Magdalena told Agnes and Corinne what had happened. Corinne was shaking. "He's going to make us disappear." "No," Magdalena said. "We leave a trail." They buried a second copy of their evidence behind the convent, beneath the 3rd cypress tree near the stone altar in the garden. Corinne recorded a video. "We'll tell the Vatican directly," Agnes insisted. "Don't trust the Vatican," Magdalena said. "Trust the truth. Trust God. And trust that someone will come." "Who?" Corinne asked. Magdalena hesitated. "Elena." 3 days later, they were gone. No goodbyes, no bags, no farewells. Just empty rooms and silence, and the record of 3 sisters who had served God, and were silenced for doing so. The bishop's residence sat behind iron gates at the top of a gently sloping hill. From the road, it looked more like a retreat center than a rectory. White stone, trimmed hedges, a private chapel at the back. It hadn't looked like this when Elena lived in Santa Reina. No one in the parish ever talked about it, but everyone knew it was his. She rang the intercom, half expecting silence. Instead, a woman's voice answered, clipped, formal. "Yes? I'm here to see Bishop Alvarado. My name is Elena Rivas." A pause. "Please wait." The gate buzzed open with a low groan. The house smelled like incense and leather. A private secretary in a navy skirt suit greeted her and led her through cool, tiled hallways lined with art. Classical, expensive, not local. "He's expecting you," the woman said, as though it were obvious. Elena raised an eyebrow. "I didn't call ahead." He was informed. The bishop sat in a high-backed chair, sunlight pouring through arched windows behind him. He looked older than she remembered. Grayer at the temples, heavier, but his posture was the same. Upright. Regal. "Elena," he said, rising, "you've returned to us." "Bishop Alvarado," she replied, not offering her hand. "Still not one for formalities." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, please." She remained standing. "I won't waste your time," she said. 3 sisters disappeared. Magdalena, Corinne, Agnes. They confronted you with proof of theft, and now they're gone. He offered a small, tight smile. "That's a bold accusation." "It's a fact. The church has always reassigned its clergy and religious as needed. It's part of our mission. Sometimes that includes discreet transitions. Without notice, without a trace." He leaned back slightly as if settling into a lecture. "Elena, you left us. You left your vows, your calling. That doesn't disqualify your concern, but it does suggest your perspective may be clouded by bitterness." She stepped closer, her voice low. "What clouds perspective is power used to silence truth. I've seen the financial records. I've seen where the money went." He tilted his head, almost amused. "Then I'm sure you also understand how difficult it is to sustain operations in this region. Aid money never stretches far. Sometimes, compromises must be made. Did your marble floors help stretch it?" His smile faded. "I suggest you tread carefully, Miss Rivas." She didn't blink. "I suggest you prepare for a formal investigation." He stood slowly, his tone changing. "You have no jurisdiction here. You are not part of this diocese. You have no standing within the church. If you continue down this road, you'll find yourself quite alone." "Better than buried," she said quietly. They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, he spoke again, softly this time. "You should leave Santa Reina, Elena, while you still can." Outside, the heat hit her like a slap. She made it to the gate before she allowed herself to breathe again. He was scared. He didn't show it on his face, but she knew the signs. The threat disguised as pastoral concern. The careful dismissal. The pointed reminder of her outsider status. He wouldn't have said anything if he thought she was harmless. That evening, Elena met Father Ignacio, an old theology professor who'd once guided her through seminary. He had aged considerably, now half-retired, caring for the small cemetery chapel by the coast. "I knew you'd come back someday," he said, handing her a cup of bitter coffee. "I didn't come for absolution." I didn't offer it. They sat on a bench overlooking the sea. Wind rustled the grass. A few candles flickered in the chapel behind them. "You've stirred something here," he said. "There's talk. Quiet talk, but persistent. About the sisters?" He nodded. "The faithful miss them, but they're afraid to ask questions. The bishop's influence is deep. deeper than it should be. I confronted him today. Ignacio winced. I hope you were careful. He threatened me. That's not surprising. He's been consolidating power for years. Took control of every financial decision. Even the diocesan board doesn't challenge him. What about Rome? They know what he reports and what he omits. Bureaucracy moves slowly, if at all. Elena pulled out the copy of the audit spreadsheet. Do you recognize this company? He squinted. Castillo Consulting. Number, that's not local. It's where the missing funds were sent. Corinne mentioned it before she vanished. Ignacio handed it back. If you want answers, you won't find them in the rectory or in the archives. Where then? He hesitated. There's someone who may know more. Someone who worked in the bishop's office before Father Manuel took over. Who? Her name is Inés Duarte. She was an assistant bookkeeper. Quiet, devout. She left suddenly a month after the sisters disappeared. Do you know where she went? Ignacio nodded. I've kept in touch. She lives in San Miguel under a different name, afraid. But maybe ready to talk. Elena stood. Can you get me there? I can try. Later that night, as Elena returned to her motel, she noticed her door ajar. She froze. The lock had been jimmied. No lights inside. No sound. She stepped back, drew her phone, and dialed. The voice on the other end was calm, official. Santa Reina Police, what's your emergency? She hesitated. And then she hung up. The police worked with the bishop. Everyone knew that. Instead, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Drawers were open. Her laptop was missing, the flash drive too. But the envelope with the photocopies, the hard copies, was still tucked under the mattress where she'd left it. She picked it up with trembling hands. They were watching her, and they wanted her to know it. San Miguel was 3 hours north of Santa Reina by bus, closer to the border, farther from suspicion. Elena arrived just before sunset, carrying only a leather satchel, a burner phone, and a folder stuffed with photocopied ledgers. Father Ignacio had arranged the meeting discreetly. Inés Duarte lived above a pharmacy, under the name I. Morales. Elena found the apartment easily. She buzzed twice. The intercom crackled. Yes? Inés? My name is Elena Rivas. I used to be a nun. Father Ignacio said you might talk to me. A pause, then a mechanical click. The door opened. Inés was in her late 40s, wearing a plain skirt and oversized sweater. She kept the chain lock on the door and looked Elena over carefully before letting her in. The apartment was small and meticulously clean. A Bible sat on the kitchen table beside a half-finished crossword. On the window sill, a dried rose and a rosary made of wood beads. I don't want to get involved, Inés said, before Elena could speak. You already are, Elena replied gently. 3 women are gone. One of them was my friend. Inés sat down slowly. You're here about the money. And the bishop. A long silence. Then Inés reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin notebook. I kept this after I left, she said. I thought about burning it. Elena opened it. The handwriting was neat, organized. Numbers, names, account details. Notes in the margins. This shows wire transfers, Elena said, scanning it. Same dates as the grant audits I found, and this matches the Panama account. I was the assistant bookkeeper, Inés said. Father Manuel oversaw everything, but I saw the reports. Money was vanishing, and they kept changing the names of the vendors. Did you say anything? To Sister Magdalena, a week before she disappeared. Elena looked up sharply. I told her about the duplicate payments and the mismatched accounts. She was the only one I trusted. What did she say? She said the church would either cleanse itself or be brought to judgment. Then she thanked me. Elena closed the notebook. You've done the right thing. No, Inés said softly. I did nothing while they were taken. Later, at a quiet cafe down the street, Elena spread the new documents across her table. The data confirmed everything. At least $1.3 million funneled into shell accounts, routed through Castillo Consulting. But there was more. One account, listed under D. Alvarado Trust, had a recurring deposit every month, $4,200, from a charitable logistics partner, linked to a Mexican holding company. The address tied back to a private estate outside La Paz. That wasn't just skimming. That was laundering. She photographed every page, uploaded the images to cloud storage, and backed them up on a new USB drive. This time she taped the drive to the underside of a wooden pew in San Miguel's chapel. She wasn't losing the evidence again. As Elena boarded the return bus to Santa Reina, her phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. "You're being watched. Don't go back to the motel." She stared at the screen. A second message arrived. "They know about Inez. She's not safe. Neither are you." Back in Santa Reina, Elena didn't go to the motel. Instead, she went to the only place no one would expect her to hide. The chapel at the outskirts of the cemetery. Father Ignacio's domain. He answered the door in his slippers, blinking against the lamplight. "I was hoping you'd come," he said. Inside, she spread the ledger and notebook on his kitchen table. Ignacio whistled. "This is enough to bring down the bishop." "No," Elena said. "It's enough to make him panic. Not enough to get Rome's attention. You need the missing piece." "A body," she said flatly. "Or a witness." Ignacio crossed himself. "They're dead, aren't they?" Elena asked quietly. "I don't know," he said. "But if they're not, they're buried somewhere worse than death." The next morning, Father Ignacio made contact with an old friend inside the diocesan maintenance crew, a groundskeeper who used to work under Sister Magdalena. His name was Luis, and he met Elena in secret near the mission gardens. "She used to ask me to help dig in the soil by the stone altar," he said, "to plant flowers." "You mean the third cypress tree?" Elena asked. He nodded. "She told me once that truth needs roots." That afternoon, under a veil of heavy clouds, Elena returned to the garden behind the convent. The place looked abandoned now, overgrown, choked with weeds. She found the third cypress tree. Kneeling beneath it, she pressed her hands into the earth. It was soft from recent rain. She dug with her fingers, breath tight in her throat. 6 inches down, she felt something hard. Wood. A box. She lifted it carefully. Inside, a flash drive in a plastic sleeve, a rosary made of copper wire, and a torn journal page. "If we do not survive this, may someone find what we could not finish." The signature was clear. Sister Magdalena. As Elena stood, the clouds broke open above her. Rain began to fall. And from the convent window behind her, she saw a silhouette watching, unmoving, unblinking. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed against the chapel roof like urgent fingers, tapping out something she couldn't quite decipher. Elena sat alone in Father Ignacio's office, the unearthed box on the table in front of her. The flash drive inside it had just finished uploading to her encrypted cloud account. She hadn't watched the video yet. The tension in her chest was so tight, it felt like her ribs might splinter. Father Ignacio returned with a towel over his shoulders, soaked from checking the locks on the chapel's side entrance. "No sign of anyone?" she asked. He shook his head. "If someone was watching, they're gone now." Elena looked down at the copper rosary in her hands. She left it buried with the flash drive. It wasn't just a message. It was a blessing. He nodded. Or a warning. She opened the journal page again. This time she noticed something she'd missed the first time. Scratched into the margin, faint but legible. "Agnes is the key." She heard everything. She remembers it all. Monsieur Elena's pulse quickened. Sister Agnes, the quiet one, the one no one ever paid attention to. "I thought all 3 disappeared," she murmured. "They did, But what if she's not dead? Father Ignacio sat down across from her. Magdalena wouldn't have written that unless she believed Agnes survived, or at least that she might. She's the only one who could testify. If she's alive. Elena stared at the journal page. Then I need to find her, and I need someone inside the diocese who might know where she was taken. Ignacio hesitated, then spoke carefully. There's one person, but he's dangerous to approach. Who? Brother Raphael. He was the bishop's driver. He disappeared for months after the sisters were reassigned, then reappeared without explanation. I always suspected he was used for something hidden. Where is he now? Still in Santarena. He works at the maintenance depot for the diocesan retreat center. I'll go. Ignacio's eyes sharpened. He won't talk freely. I don't expect him to. The retreat center was tucked into the hills beyond Santarena, shielded by eucalyptus trees and forgotten by most. Elena arrived under a gray sky. The grounds were silent. She found the maintenance depot behind the chapel hall. Brother Raphael was hunched over a toolbox, sorting nails and bolts. Brother Raphael? She called. He looked up, startled. He wore overalls now, no collar. His hair was thinner, eyes heavier. Yes? I need to speak with you. About the sisters. He went still. I don't know anything. I think you do. I've said everything I need to say. She stepped forward. They trusted someone. Someone to move them. Someone to keep it quiet. You need to leave, miss. They're gone. Dead, maybe. But not forgotten. He turned sharply. I said leave. She lowered her voice. If you helped him, I'll find out. If you didn't, if you tried to protect them, you have a chance to say so now. He stared at her, trembling. Then he whispered, There was a place. What kind of place? They called it the Casa de Retiro, but it wasn't listed anywhere. A cabin, way up past the retreat trails. Only the bishop and Father Manuel had the key. Was Sister Agnes taken there? He nodded once. For how long? I don't know. I brought food. I wasn't allowed inside. Do you know if she's still alive? He looked down. Sometimes I heard humming. Elena froze. What kind of humming? Religious, like chanting. Software, I didn't imagine it. The last time I brought food, maybe 3 months ago, I heard coughing too. She grabbed her notebook. Can you take me there? Number, if they catch me. I'll go alone, but I need directions. Raphael scribbled onto a paper towel. There's a side trail off the main path. If the trees open up, you've gone too far. She took the map. Thank you. He looked at her with haunted eyes. If you find her, tell her I never stopped praying. Elena hiked the trail late the next day, under cloud cover and wind. The forest was quiet, save for the crunch of her boots on wet earth. The side trail was almost invisible, overgrown, hidden behind brambles. She followed it for 20 minutes, ducking branches and swallowing fear. And then she saw it. A cabin, low to the ground, wood darkened with age, shutters sealed, no light. She stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. There was no sound. She circled the structure. At the back, a rusted air grate embedded in the soil. She knelt beside it, and then, softly, barely, she heard it, a voice, humming. The same melody Elena had learned as a novice, the Salve Regina. She pressed her face to the vent. Agnes, she whispered. The humming stopped. A pause, then coughing, harsh, ragged, followed by a voice, broken but unmistakably human. Hello? Elena's eyes filled with tears. I'm here to help. A long silence, and then, Are you real? Yes, Elena said, touching the grate. My name is Elena Rivas. You knew me. I was Sister Elena. Oh, Elena. The voice was weeping now. They told me you left. I did. But I came back. I know what happened. I know what they did to you. Agnes's voice cracked. I thought I was dead. "You're not," Elena said fiercely. "You're not. I'm going to get help. Hold on, I promise. I'll come back for you." Elena ran back down the trail, faster than she'd ever run in her life. She didn't stop until she reached Ignacio's car at the base of the hill. She climbed inside, shaking. "She's alive," she said. Ignacio stared at her. "We have to get her out, tonight." The wind picked up as dusk fell over the hills, and with it came the unmistakable weight of danger. Elena sat across from Father Ignacio in the small chapel office, a map of the trail between them. "She's alive," she said again, like she needed to say it out loud to make it real. "Agnes is alive. I heard her. I spoke to her." Ignacio had aged 10 years in an hour. "How is she surviving?" "She said they brought food, but not in months." "And she's underground?" "In a room or cell beneath the cabin. There's an air vent. Old, rusted. If that's all the ventilation she has." Elena trailed off. "We don't have time." He rubbed his eyes. "If we go now, we go without backup. No warrant, no protection. If we wait, she dies." Ignacio stared at the crucifix above the door. "Then we go." They left just before midnight, driving Father Ignacio's truck as far as the retreat's outer parking lot. From there, the hike took 40 minutes up the trail, through bramble and darkness. Ignacio carried a crowbar. Elena carried a flashlight and her phone, already recording audio. They found the cabin in silence. It looked even more forsaken in the moonlight. No electricity, no markings. The front door was padlocked. They crept to the back. Elena knelt by the air vent and whispered, "Agnes?" No answer. She felt the chill of panic rise. Then, just faintly, a cough. "I'm here," Elena whispered. "We're here." Ignacio crouched beside her. "We'll get you out. Hold on." The rear of the cabin had a storm door, half buried in earth, locked with chains. Ignacio wedged the crowbar beneath the hinge. It took 3 tries and a snapped bolt, but the chain finally gave. The door creaked open, revealing a stone staircase descending into blackness. Elena clicked on her flashlight. The air below smelled like rot and mildew and something metallic. They descended. The steps led to a narrow passage carved from stone and reinforced with wooden beams. The beam edges were charred, as if a fire had once eaten through part of it. At the end of the corridor, a wooden door stood shut, iron-braced and bolted from the outside. Ignacio whispered a prayer. Then they unlatched it. The door creaked open. The room was small, 8 by 10 feet, dirt floor, mold on the walls, a mattress in one corner, a bowl, a rusted bucket, and her. She sat against the wall, thinner than anything Elena could have imagined. Her hair was white and hacked short. Her skin was pale, translucent, stretched over bone. But her eyes, Elena knew those eyes. "Sister Agnes," she said, kneeling. The nun blinked. "You came back." Ignacio dropped to his knees beside her. "You're safe now, sister." Agnes tried to smile. Her voice was a rasp. "No one believed. No one thought I was real." "You're going to the hospital," Elena said. "We have a car. We'll get you help." Agnes gripped her hand. "He told me I'd die down here, that no one would care, that the church would bury me with the rest." Elena's voice shook. "You're not buried. You're a witness." They carried her out slowly, carefully. Elena wrapped her in Ignacio's coat. By the time they reached the truck, dawn was breaking, bleeding orange across the sky. Agnes drifted in and out of consciousness, but before she slipped into sleep completely, she whispered something to Elena. "There's another room, beneath the garden." He said it was sacred, but it smelled like death. Elena froze. "A crypt?" Ignacio asked. Agnes's head fell back. She didn't respond, but Elena knew what she meant. Not a crypt, a grave. They rushed Agnes to the clinic at Santa Reina. The attending nurse, a volunteer who had known Agnes for years, wept when she saw her. Elena remained by the door as the nurse hooked up fluids and oxygen. A doctor was called from town. Ignacio phoned a journalist contact in La Paz. The story was no longer just evidence of corruption. It was human imprisonment, and maybe worse. By noon, word had spread. The bishop's office issued a short statement. The Diocese of Santa Reina is aware of false and inflammatory accusations. We ask the faithful to remain in prayer and trust in the discernment of church leadership. Elena read it out loud to Ignacio, her voice flat. He's spinning it as slander. He won't be able to spin it for long. That afternoon, police arrived at the clinic, not to arrest the bishop, but to question Elena about unlawful entry. She refused to answer. But behind the scenes, Ignacio and his journalist contact were preparing a dossier, evidence, recordings, photographs, financial records, to send to a contact within the Vatican. Still, Elena knew it wasn't enough. She hadn't forgotten what Agnes had said. Another room beneath the garden. They had found the living. Now they had to find the dead. That evening, Elena returned to the convent garden alone. She wore gloves and carried a small shovel. She returned to the altar where she had unearthed Magdalena's message. The earth was softer than she expected, like someone had disturbed it recently. She dug slowly. 6 inches down, her shovel hit something hard. Not a box, stone. She cleared the dirt. A slab of concrete, roughly shaped. A homemade grave marker. Her fingers trembled. She dug around the edges until she could wedge her fingers beneath and lift. Beneath the slab, a torn scrap of brown fabric, a rosary, and bone. Human bone. She collapsed back, breath gone. She had found them, or at least one of them. The silence of the garden roared in her ears. She rose, backed away, and called Ignacio. "We found her," she said. "Or what's left." "Which one?" "I don't know yet." "Stay there. I'm calling the police and the press." By nightfall, crime scene tape circled the garden. Local police reluctantly allowed forensic investigators to begin their work. A second set of remains was found, deeper in the soil, wrapped in what appeared to be a habit, soaked in earth. 2 bodies. Elena watched from behind the tape as they were unearthed. She didn't know if it was Magdalena or Corinne, but she knew this. The dead could no longer be silenced, and neither could she. By morning, the story had gone national. Tortured nun found alive in Mexico church property. Santa Reina Diocese under investigation for possible homicide. The footage from the garden, forensic teams in cassocks and hazmat suits, looped on screens across the country. Crowds gathered outside the cathedral. Some knelt in prayer, others shouted for justice. Inside the hospital, Sister Agnes drifted in and out of sleep. When conscious, she whispered names, details, dates. The doctors were cautious. The investigators were not. Elena gave her statement to the federal authorities. She presented the ledgers, the photos, the voice recordings. She signed over the flash drives. A detective from Mexico City took it all without blinking. "The bishop?" Elena asked. "Being watched," the detective replied. "We're building the case." "He'll run." The detective shook his head. "We don't think he'll need to." Elena blinked. "Why?" "Because there's more." A tip had come in that morning from an anonymous source, someone close to the diocese. They claimed Bishop Alvarado maintained a private chamber beneath the old diocesan archive, long sealed and marked as condemned. The source claimed it had been repurposed. For what, they didn't say. But Sister Agnes, upon hearing it, whispered, "That's where they took Magdalena. She told me the night before she disappeared. If anything happens to her, that's where to look." It was enough. The police obtained an emergency warrant. Elena stood just outside the broken doors of the archive building as the team entered. It was an old, colonial structure. Stone, crumbling, windowless. The diocesan office had shuttered it years ago, citing mold and instability. In truth, no one had been allowed near it in over a decade. Until now. Flashlights cut through the musty dark. Elena followed behind the officers, heart pounding. They found the trap door beneath a loose flagstone, exactly where Agnes said it would be. Iron latch. Old. Rusted. One of the officers pried it open. A ladder descended into darkness. The smell hit first. Rot, blood, wet stone. The chamber beneath was larger than expected. An unfinished crypt of sorts, carved into the earth, ringed with crumbling bricks and old plaster. Symbols were scratched into the walls, Latin phrases, fragments of psalms, and something that looked like a twisted imitation of a crucifix. And in the far corner, a cot, stained. Beside it, iron shackles bolted to the wall. A rosary, snapped in half, lay on the floor nearby. Elena covered her mouth. The forensics team began photographing everything. One of the detectives turned to her. "Do you recognize this?" Elena nodded slowly. "It matches what Agnes described. She said Magdalena was taken here after she tried to escape. Then this is a crime scene. Worse, Elena said. It's a tomb." They found a second room through a collapsed passage. Inside, a crude altar, scorched black with soot. Candles melted into the floor. Burnt paper fragments. Among them, a torn page from a prayer book. And behind the altar, buried in a cavity in the wall, a third body, wrapped in burlap. Elena turned away as the remains were lifted from the earth. The third nun had been found, and the case was no longer circumstantial. It was murder. Bishop Alvarado was arrested the next morning in his private chapel, kneeling at the altar, wearing white vestments and reciting a homily into a mirror. When the authorities entered, he didn't look up. He simply said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Elena watched the footage on a cracked television in the hospital lobby. He didn't resist, didn't speak to reporters, but as the car door shut, she thought she saw his lips move. A curse, or maybe a prayer. That afternoon, Elena visited Agnes one last time before heading to court. Agnes looked stronger now, fed, warm, protected. Her face still bore the lines of terror, but her eyes had steadied. "They found her, didn't they?" she asked. Elena nodded. "And Corinne?" "She was buried in the garden. We're waiting for positive ID, but yes." Agnes stared at the ceiling. "We tried to warn them, the church, the world." "You did more than that," Elena said. "You gave them the truth." Agnes smiled faintly. "Then we weren't alone." Elena took her hand. "Not anymore." That evening, Elena submitted her final statement to the authorities. The judge fast-tracked the arraignment. The charges: unlawful imprisonment, obstruction of justice, misuse of public and religious funds, murder. In the second degree, Bishop Diego Alvarado would not see the inside of his cathedral again. The courthouse was packed, not with parishioners or the press. Those filled the plaza outside, but with civil authorities, Vatican emissaries, and human rights advocates who had traveled across borders to witness what no one expected to ever see. A bishop on trial for crimes not only against the state, but against his own flock. Elena sat at the front of the gallery. She wore no habit, no crucifix, only black slacks and a blazer. But her presence was unmistakable. She wasn't just a witness. She was the thread that had unraveled everything, and she knew it. The trial was held in a special tribunal court in La Paz, one designated for high-level cases involving corruption and institutional abuse. International observers had been invited. A judge presided with 3 clerical advisors seated at his sides, an echo of church tradition blending uncomfortably with civil law. The defendant, Bishop Diego Alvarado, was escorted in by armed guards. He wore a simple prison-issued suit, no vestments, no ring. His expression was blank, yet unrepentant. He didn't scan the crowd. He didn't look at Elena. Not yet. The prosecution opened with the financial records, offshore accounts, laundered grant money, ledgers cross-verified with Vatican archives and witness testimony. Inez Duarte's notebook was cited as the initial breach in the seal of corruption. Elena's sworn deposition followed, describing how she received the evidence, tracked the buried files, and uncovered Sister Agnes. Then the forensic reports were presented. Human remains discovered beneath the convent garden, consistent with women of matching age and religious dress. Injuries suggest blunt force trauma followed by shallow burial. The chamber beneath the diocesan archives was introduced as evidence of unlawful confinement. Elena noticed a flicker then, a twitch in Alvarado's jaw. The defense, when it came, was as weak as it was venomous. He was protecting the sanctity of the church. There was no proven connection between the funds and his personal accounts. The women were unstable, possibly radical. And finally, Miss Rivas, a former nun with a known grievance against church leadership, orchestrated much of the narrative for personal and political gain. That drew a murmur from the gallery. Elena didn't flinch. When she took the stand, she spoke clearly and calmly. No personal gain has come from this. Only loss and accountability. What I did for the women who were silenced, for the church they still believed in. Not the church of marble floors, but the church of truth. She paused, then looked straight at Alvarado. You told the world they were reassigned, that they left freely, that they were too radical. But they weren't. They were right. The climax of the trial came on day 4. Sister Agnes testified. Escorted in by medical aides, her voice thin but resolute, she described everything. The night of the reassignment. The tea they were given. How Sister Corinne collapsed first. How Magdalena fought back and was dragged away. She described the garden, the underground room, the voice she heard, Father Manuel's, saying, God's work is not to question the shepherd. And finally, she described the day Elena's voice came through the vent. I thought I was dead, she said. But then she came back for me. Would you recognize the man who ordered your imprisonment? The prosecutor asked. Agnes didn't even hesitate. She raised her hand, trembling, and pointed. To him, she whispered. The bishop. Alvarado stared straight ahead, unmoving. After a brief recess, the judge returned with the ruling. On the charges of financial corruption, human rights violations, and complicity in the deaths of Sisters Magdalena Cruz and Corinne Estrella, the court finds Diego Alvarado guilty. A collective exhale moved through the room. The judge continued. The defendant is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He is hereby excommunicated from public office in the Church and referred to the Vatican Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for canonical review. There would be no cathedral, no absolution, not this side of heaven. Outside, the crowds erupted in mixed emotion, grief, justice, celebration, disbelief. Inside, Elena stayed seated long after the judge left the room. Father Ignacio placed a hand on her shoulder. It's done, he said. She shook her head. It's begun. Later that evening, the Vatican issued a formal response. The Holy See condemns all forms of abuse and institutional cover-up. We offer prayers for the victims and a full commitment to cooperation with civil authorities. A canonical tribunal will follow. It was the strongest statement they'd ever made on the matter. It still wasn't enough, but it was something. Elena visited Agnes one final time before leaving Santa Reina. The nun's hands had grown steadier, her voice stronger. You saved me, Agnes said. Elena shook her head. You survived. I just listened. Agnes smiled. The others would be proud. I hope so. Will you go back? Agnes asked. To the church? Agnes nodded. Elena looked out the window toward the garden. "I never really left," she said. "I just stopped obeying." 6 months later, the convent garden had been rebuilt. Where there was once weeds and silence, there were now wildflowers and stone benches. A small memorial stood near the cypress tree, in memory of Sisters Magdalena Cruz, Corinne Estrella, and all voices silenced in faith. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. Visitors came from across the country to pray. Some were believers, some were not, but all of them came seeking the same thing, something true. Elena returned quietly, not to stay, but to see. Sister Agnes had made a full physical recovery, though she had chosen not to re-enter religious life. Instead, she served as director of the new Santa Reina Center for Restorative Justice, offering aid to survivors of clerical abuse and institutional silence. "Justice isn't punishment," she told Elena. "It's protection, it's acknowledgement, it's restoration." Elena had smiled. "You always were the gentle one." Agnes shrugged. "Gentleness is just quiet strength." Father Ignacio remained at the cemetery chapel. He had refused all promotion, all recognition, even when the Vatican offered an apology and the press called him a hero. He remained, as always, close to the ground. One evening, Elena found him lighting candles in the chapel. "You came back," he said. "I always do." He handed her a match. "There's one more to light." "For whom?" "For those we still haven't found. The ones we'll never have names for." She struck the match and watched the flame catch. Outside, the sun was setting over Santa Reina. The bell at the new mission chapel rang 3 times, a tradition the bishop had tried to silence. Elena listened. Once for the dead, once for the living, once for the truth. As she walked through the plaza, she passed a child kneeling at the statue of Our Lady of Sorrows. Someone had placed a fresh flower at her feet. The statue had been moved back to the front of the church, where she could be seen, where she could watch, where she could bear witness. In the distance, Elena could hear voices from the new community center. Laughter, music, children playing soccer in the courtyard where, just a year ago, only silence reigned. She took it in for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the copper wire rosary she'd kept since that night. Not to pray, but to remember. She held it for a moment, then set it gently on the memorial stone, next to the names of the women who had refused to look away. As she turned to leave, someone called her name. "Elena!" She turned. It was a young woman in plain clothes. Not a nun. Not yet. "I heard what you did," the girl said, breathless. "I want to do the same. Help people, hold the church accountable. Do you think there's room for that?" Elena smiled, something soft and tired and full of hope. "There better be," she said.